believe we are in a climate emergency when I look at the extreme weather events in this country and around the world. I have no doubt I've seen pictures of floods in Europe that scared me. And the one thing that scares me is that, yes, we are in this pandemic. And also, have we actually looked at the link between the COVID-19 pandemic and the broader climate change issues? Have we really researched that? Are we satisfied that this is it, or are we going to face more pandemics like this? What is the science telling us? Climate change doesn't discriminate. Climate change impacts don't discriminate. So they are affecting all of us in the world. I looked at those floods in Europe, like with all the money they had, they couldn't stop those cars to be flushed away. And I believe that they've got robust systems in place. Their infrastructure is top-notch. And then, how can a small country like Lesotho, Swaziland, the small island states, how will they cope if these extreme climate events are going to be a regular occurrence? How are we going to survive? South Africa must care, and it must participate in the multilateral process that is currently underway, must adhere to the Paris Agreement, should become very ambitious in terms of how it's going to cut down its own carbon emissions. Women, they are the poor in many countries. For example, I can say in South Africa, or even in a continent, we can then draw a conclusion, because we're saying that climate change affects the poor the most. And within that grouping of the poor, when we look deeper, we find that, for example, in many, many rural communities like Eastern Cape and Limpopo, huge populations are women, because men have migrated to provinces like Gauteng, where there's economic activity. As a result of that, we then draw that conclusion. We draw it because many of the rural poor are dependent on natural resources. Like where I come from in Limpopo, Mopani worms harvesting marula trees that they process, and they are they also harvesting grass that they sell as brooms in towns and all of that. They also are heavily reliant on subsistence agriculture. All of these, the natural environment and the subsistence agriculture, they are all being affected by the impacts of climate change heavily. We've seen droughts, we've seen floods, we've seen unpredictability of the availability of the natural resources that women have been harvesting over time. And I'm saying women because these are the kind of things that they are reliant on in many of the rural areas. And the added burden that women carry during climate disasters, they are the majority in many of these rural areas. If there's been a tornado, they are then have to be now moving away from their roles of looking after their children and the elderly to now looking at rebuilding. And we're also looking at those studies that proven that a lot more women died during the tsunami. Why? Also learning that more women are more vulnerable in these relief efforts, where they are put in churches and big halls without considering any private spaces, and sanitation equipment is placed outside and all of these things. Women tend to suffer gender-based violence in those areas. So the impact of energy poverty on the poor manifests itself in many different fronts. The first one is the continuous cycle of poverty, where they're not able to break out of it. So there are opportunities for them to operate sewing machines, to produce clothes and uniforms, whatever, that would start seeing them diversifying their livelihoods from subsistence agriculture into something better. The second one is the issues around just living a decent life, having light for the children to be able to study, decent light, right? And these kids are expected to perform miracles and to become the leaders of this country in the future, and we are not going to get there. It's also about the health issues. So they continuously use unclean energy sources. In this century, we shouldn't be having people being exposed to smoke of coal or wood in a closed area like this, because in winter they've got no choice. So you've got the health impacts, you've got economic impacts, you've got just issues around living a decent life. This country has had a water crisis for I believe for many decades. If I think of my own village where I come from in Limpopo, we've had day zero even before I went to university, more than 20 years ago, more than 30 years ago. Now, all of that is being exacerbated by these extreme droughts that are coming as a result of climate change. You know, a drier, hotter environment that we are facing. We need the private sector. We need all of the stakeholders. We need the science. We need the engineers, everyone to be able to come on board, to be able to resolve this, because this has been an ongoing. Because we've got situations where, for example, in Limpopo, where mining companies are literally taking the water away from the people, and there's a big contest between the mines and the people to be able to access the water. It's also connected to the issues, to our energy issues as well. And I think we need to look at it as in a holistic manner, to be able to get to the heart of it and actually come up with innovation.